The air inside the wedding hall was suffocating, a mix of roses, incense, and the weight of hundreds of expectant stares. The chandeliers sparkled overhead, raining golden light across the marble floor, but to her it felt more like a prison spotlight, exposing every flicker of doubt that churned inside her chest. Her veil clung to her lips as she tried to breathe, her hands trembling inside the delicate lace gloves. The music swelled, violins rising in a slow, aching crescendo that matched the pounding of her heart. Each step toward the altar felt like a step away from herself, away from the girl she once knew, and toward a cage she could never escape. She looked at the man waiting for her, dressed in his tailored suit, his smile broad and proud, his eyes gleaming with possession rather than love. She knew this marriage was never about her happiness. It was about alliances, wealth, reputation, everything her family valued more than her freedom. Her throat tightened as she realized she was about to give her life away, not to love, but to a contract. Her mother's watchful gaze from the front row burned into her, urging her to keep walking, to play her role. But her legs trembled as though they might collapse beneath her weight. The priest's voice began to echo, the words blurring into an indistinct hum. "Do you take this man?" She couldn't focus. All she could hear was the scream inside her mind, the one that had been building for weeks, months, maybe years. "No, no, this isn't me. I can't do this." Her lips parted, but no sound came. Her fiancé reached for her hand, firm, possessive, sealing the deal in front of hundreds of witnesses. And in that instant, something inside her broke. She yanked her hand back. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Her fiancé's smile faltered, then hardened into something dangerous. Before anyone could move, before anyone could trap her in that moment, she turned and ran. The hall exploded in murmurs and shocked exclamations. The train of her gown tangled around her feet as she sprinted down the aisle, but she didn't stop. The sound of her shoes against the marble was sharp, urgent, a rhythm of rebellion. Behind her, voices called her name, her father's booming command, her mother's pleading whisper, the groom's enraged shout, but none of them mattered. For the first time in years, her legs carried her where her heart wanted to go, away. She pushed through the doors, stumbling into the cool night air. The silence outside was a shocking contrast to the chaos inside. The stars blurred above her as she fought to breathe, her chest rising and falling beneath the heavy bodice of her dress. She didn't have a plan. She just knew she had to get away. Her eyes darted across the lot filled with parked cars, drivers waiting for wealthy guests, engines idling like beasts ready to flee. Her veil fluttered loose as she spotted a sleek black car parked in the shadows at the far corner. The doors gleamed under the dim streetlight, its tinted windows reflecting her own desperate face. Something about it called to her, like a dark promise of escape. She ran toward it, heart hammering, lungs burning, terrified someone would grab her before she reached it. Her hands shook as she yanked the door open. To her surprise, it wasn't locked. She slipped inside, the cool leather swallowing her in its scent of power and wealth. Slamming the door shut, she collapsed against the seat, gasping, hiding, praying she had seconds before anyone saw her. Her pulse thundered in her ears. The noise of the crowd outside grew distant. For a brief, fleeting moment, she thought she had found safety. She closed her eyes, trying to gather herself, her breath coming in ragged bursts. But then, a voice, deep, calm, and chillingly composed, cut through the silence. "I was wondering when you'd show up." Her eyes flew open. There was someone already in the car. Her body stiffened, every muscle locked as the deep voice rippled through the darkened car. For a second, she thought she had imagined it, a trick of her pounding heart. But then, as her eyes adjusted to the dim glow of the dashboard, she saw him. A man sat there, composed and impossibly calm, his arm resting casually on the steering wheel as though he had been waiting all along. His suit was black, perfectly cut, hugging broad shoulders with a kind of effortless authority. The faint light caught the sharp line of his jaw, the glint in his eyes that weren't startled by her intrusion but instead studied her like a puzzle he had already solved. Her breath caught in her throat. Who are you?" The words came out in a hoarse whisper, barely audible, but they betrayed the storm inside her. She was terrified, embarrassed, and inexplicably aware of the dangerous magnetism radiating from him. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned slightly toward her, his voice lowering as if to make sure she didn't mistake his calm for indifference. "The better question is, who are you running from?" Her hands fumbled with the edge of her dress, her knuckles white. I wasn't. I just needed somewhere to hide." She couldn't meet his eyes, couldn't admit the truth that she had just abandoned a wedding filled with hundreds of witnesses. But she could feel his gaze pinning her in place, sharp and unrelenting. A faint smirk curved his lips. Most brides don't run from the altar unless they have a very good reason. The word bride stung like a slap, dragging the reality of her situation back into her chest. She turned to the window, her veil brushing the glass, afraid that at any second, the doors of the hull would burst open and her family would come storming after her. She could already imagine her fiancé's face, twisted with rage, humiliation simmering beneath his skin. "You don't understand," she murmured, voice shaking. "They'll be looking for me." "I know," he said smoothly, his tone chilling in its certainty. "That's why you came here." Her eyes snapped back to him. "What do you mean?" I didn't even know this car was here." But something in his expression suggested otherwise, as if this moment had been predicted long before she ever gathered the courage to run. He shifted slightly, his movements precise, deliberate, the kind of control only a man used to power could carry. "Maybe you didn't know, but sometimes, we end up exactly where we're meant to be." His words unsettled her. Who was this man? He wasn't panicking at her sudden arrival, wasn't demanding she get out, wasn't even surprised. Instead, he looked as if he had been waiting for her. "You don't even know me," she said finally, her voice sharper, desperate to pierce through the haze of confusion he wrapped her in. But the way his eyes darkened told her otherwise. "You'd be surprised how much I know." Her pulse quickened, fear tangling with something else, something dangerous and unspoken. She pressed her back into the leather seat, clutching her skirt as if it were the only thing keeping her grounded. Outside, the distant shouts of guests echoed into the night. Inside, the air thickened with a tension that made it hard to breathe. "You need to get out of here," she said suddenly, panic rushing over her. "If they find me in your car." But he only reached forward, turning the key. The engine roared to life, smooth and commanding, like the man himself. Without another word, he shifted the car into gear, the tires whispering against the pavement as they rolled away from the chaos. She stared at him in disbelief. "Wait. You can't just. Where are you taking me?" He glanced at her, and for a moment, she swore she saw the ghost of a smile playing at the corner of his lips. "Somewhere they won't find you." The city lights blurred past as they accelerated into the night. Her fingers dug into the seat, torn between fear of the stranger who seemed to know far too much and relief that she was finally leaving everything behind. But one thought gnawed at her as she dared another glance at him, the enigma of his calm expression and piercing eyes. He hadn't been surprised at all when she entered his car. As if he had known she would come. The city lights flickered like 1,000 restless eyes as the car slipped deeper into the night. She pressed her palm against the cool glass, her reflection staring back at her in fragments, the veil tangled around her hair, the smeared lipstick, the wild fear in her eyes. Her wedding dress felt suffocating, a costume that no longer belonged to her, its lace digging into her skin as though punishing her for her rebellion. The hum of the engine filled the silence, steady and low, yet her heartbeat thudded louder than anything else. She stole a glance at the man behind the wheel. He drove with unnerving composure, one hand steady, his gaze fixed ahead as if the road belonged to him. There was no hesitation in his movements, no fumbling, no sign of uncertainty. Every turn he took seemed deliberate, as though he knew exactly where to go. She couldn't help but notice how the faint glow of the dashboard illuminated his profile, the sculpted lines of his jaw, the curve of his lips, the sharp focus in his eyes. He looked like someone used to control, someone who thrived on it. Finally, she broke the silence. "Why are you doing this?" Her voice trembled, betraying the mix of fear and curiosity that churned within her. He didn't look at her immediately. Instead, his lips curved into that same faint, infuriating smirk. "Because you asked me to." Her brows knitted. "I didn't ask you anything." "Not with words," he replied smoothly, finally flicking his gaze toward her. "But the way you ran, the way you dove into this car as if it was the only sanctuary left in the world, that was as clear a plea as any." Her chest tightened. She hated how his words struck at something raw inside her, how they made her feel exposed. "You don't even know me," she insisted, though the conviction in her voice faltered. He chuckled lowly, the sound resonating in the small space between them. "Don't I?" Her breath caught. There was something in his tone, something that hinted at more than coincidence. "What do you mean?" she pressed, leaning forward despite herself. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned the wheel sharply, guiding the car down a quieter street lined with shadows. The noise of the city faded, replaced by the whisper of tires against asphalt. His voice, when it came, was softer but no less commanding. "Your fiancé," he said, his eyes flicking briefly toward her before returning to the road. "He isn't the man you think he is." Her stomach dropped. "You don't know anything about him," she snapped, though deep down, her words lacked conviction. She did know. She had seen glimpses, the controlling grip on her arm, the cold calculations in his gaze when no one was watching. The man beside her tilted his head, as though reading her silence. "I know enough. Enough to understand why you couldn't go through with it. Enough to know you've been looking for an escape long before tonight." Her lips parted, but no words came. It was as if he had reached into her chest and plucked out her deepest secret, one she hadn't dared admit even to herself. The weight of his words pressed against her, equal parts terrifying and liberating. "You've been watching me," she whispered finally, her voice hoarse. He didn't deny it, he simply let the silence confirm what she already suspected. Her heart pounded harder, every beat echoing with questions. Who was this man? Why did he seem to know her better than she knew herself? And why, despite the fear curling inside her, did she feel a dangerous flicker of trust in him? Outside, the glow of the city dimmed as they drove farther into the unknown. Inside the car, the tension thickened, every second stretching taut like a wire ready to snap. She turned her face toward him again, studying him in the shadows. "If you know so much, then tell me. Why are you really helping me?" This time, he did look at her, his gaze sharp, unflinching, almost predatory in its intensity. "Because," he said slowly, each word deliberate, "sometimes the person running needs someone who's already been waiting." Her breath hitched. The certainty in his voice shook her more than the uncertainty of her future. She didn't know if she had just stumbled into safety, or into a far greater danger than the one she'd escaped. And yet, for the first time all night, she didn't feel like she was running alone. The car slowed, its tires crunching softly over gravel as it pulled into a secluded overlook high above the city. The skyline stretched out before them, glittering with 1,000 lights, a reminder of the world she had just left behind. Here, though, it felt distant, almost unreal, like a stage she no longer belonged to. The engine purred quietly before he shifted it into park, his hand steady, deliberate, as though even ending the ride was part of a carefully planned rhythm. Silence settled between them. She gripped the folds of her gown, her knuckles white against the delicate fabric, her breath shallow. The night air seeping through the vents was cool, but inside the car the tension felt thick enough to choke her. He didn't move right away, didn't rush to speak. He simply sat there, watching the city below, his expression unreadable. Finally, he turned to her. His gaze locked onto hers, steady and unyielding, and for a moment she couldn't look away. "You've been running your whole life," he said softly, though the words landed with the weight of a verdict. "Tonight was just the first time you admitted it to yourself." Her throat tightened. She wanted to deny it, to tell him he was wrong, but the truth burned too deeply inside her. He was right. She had been running. From expectations, from obligations, from a version of herself that everyone else had tried to build while suffocating the real her beneath it. Tonight had only been the breaking point. Tears pricked at her eyes, hot and unwelcome. "I didn't know what else to do," she whispered. "If I stayed, I would have been trapped forever." He leaned back against his seat, his profile sharp in the dim light. "And yet here you are, in a stranger's car, trusting someone you've never met." His words made her chest tighten, but there was no judgment in his tone, only observation. She swallowed hard, her fingers twisting into her gown. Maybe I didn't have a choice." "There's always a choice," he countered, his voice low, commanding. Then he turned fully toward her, his eyes narrowing as if stripping away every layer she hid behind. "The real question is, what do you want to choose now?" Her lips parted, but nothing came out. No one had ever asked her that. Her parents had dictated her path, her fiancé had demanded obedience, society had expected perfection. But no one had ever stopped to ask her what she wanted. She shook her head, her voice breaking. I don't even know who I am without them telling me. A flicker of something softened in his eyes, though his voice remained firm. Then maybe it's time to find out. The silence that followed felt louder than any words. The city below glimmered like a promise she could no longer keep, a life that was no longer hers. She looked at him, this enigmatic man who had been waiting in the shadows as though her rebellion had been inevitable. Fear still coiled in her stomach, but alongside it, a spark of something else, possibility. Why are you helping me? She asked again, her voice steadier this time. His gaze held hers, unwavering. Because freedom is wasted if you run straight into another cage. I won't let that happen to you. Her heart pounded. The certainty in his tone was terrifying, but it also soothed something restless inside her, something that longed for someone to finally see her, not just the mask she wore. He leaned slightly closer, his voice lowering. You can go back, if that's what you want. Back to the life they chose for you. Or, his pause was deliberate, heavy with meaning. You can stay in this car. You can step into a life where every choice is yours. But understand, choosing me means stepping into a world far more dangerous than the one you just left. Her breath shuddered. The world he offered was unknown, unpredictable, and wrapped in shadows. Yet the alternative, the polished halls of her old life, the suffocating expectations, the cold smile of her fiancé, felt like a death sentence. Her hand trembled as she looked down at the dress that had once symbolized her future. Now it felt like a shroud. Slowly, deliberately, she lifted her gaze back to him. I don't want to go back, she said, her voice soft but certain. For the first time, his smirk faded into something more genuine, almost imperceptible, a flicker of approval, of understanding. He reached for the gear shift, his movements smooth, final. Then your old life ends tonight. The car lurched forward, leaving the glittering skyline behind, carrying her into a future that terrified her as much as it thrilled her. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't running away, she was running toward something. Something dangerous, something real.